Mount Everest, the highest place on Earth. It's the holy grail for mountaineers and a lifelong obsession for Australian climber Lincoln Hall.
My fascination with Everest began in the 1980s. I became so obsessed with climbing that I just kept going as far with it as I could. And that took me to Everest.
As dawn breaks, he reaches what's known to climbers as the second step. The biggest obstacle between Lincoln and his dream.
It was just all that joy of the technical part of climbing combined with the world's greatest mountain. And the mountains had started to take shape. We could see the ghostly shape of the summit pyramid. With the summit of Mount Everest within my grasp, the amount of effort I was going to have to put in didn't really matter because I knew I did have that energy within me to get to the summit. Those last steps were really difficult, but I knew I would get there.
Lincoln has made it to the summit of Everest. He's on top of the world.
I could just feel this glow of excitement and of joy. It was just the most wonderful feeling. "25 years since I'd started thinking about Everest, and finally I was here. And just the immensity of the view, the distance that you could see, the curvature of the earth. It was just beautiful.
I was just walking past the communication tent when I heard his voice.
Lincoln, it's Mike, over.
I can't believe we're here.
It was fantastic because Lincoln deserved it more than anybody.
Finally.
He was perfectly calm. It sounded as though he was ringing from the office.
Thanks, guys.
Just remember, though, you're only halfway there, okay? We'll celebrate when you get back, over.
Somebody has to remind you that although it's a beautiful view, get down is a crucial thing, and get down quickly.
When you get to the summit, you're only halfway there. Reaching the summit isn't being a good mountaineer, it's coming back home every time.
Lincoln knows they must descend immediately from the death zone, as no one can survive at this altitude for long.
The death zone has earned its name because it's at a height where your body is literally dying. With the shortage of oxygen, it's very easy to let a little error slip past you, and that can lead to death.
Lincoln and his guides now face a grueling 3-hour descent to get back to the pre-summit camp.
That extra energy that you had from achieving your ambition suddenly you don't have that ambition and you're just filled with tiredness. Suddenly, I just felt exhausted. Then I became overwhelmed with lethargy. And I passed out in the snow.
Suffering from a severe form of altitude sickness, oxygen starvation is causing blood vessels to leak fluid into Lincoln's brain.
I couldn't live in this oxygen-starved environment for very long at all.
If he doesn't get up and get down the mountain fast, he'll die. And Lincoln's mental state is getting worse.
I was in a trance. I was just incredibly confused.
Another Sherpa is at the second step.
And I wondered what he was doing there.
A climber that he was guiding to the summit has died just below them. Already confused, the news pushes Lincoln over the edge.
It was such a shock that I fell to pieces. It was me battling the Sherpas. I was really on the very edge. It's an 11,000-foot drop. That's where I wanted to jump. I was trying to jump off the face. I had gone delirious.
Georgia to base camp. Do you read me? Over.
His guide radios Lincoln's close friend Mike Dillon at base camp for help.
Put the radio to Lincoln's ear. I want to talk to him. Okay, Lincoln, mate, it's Mike.
Can you hear me? It's Mike.
We were his friends, we spoke his language. Even though his mind was obviously irrational, we thought that we might be able to help.
Lincoln, you've got to get up.
Mike is Lincoln's only hope. The Sherpas can't carry him down. But staying with Lincoln at this altitude could kill them too. If Lincoln doesn't get up, he'll be left to die.
Lincoln, Mike, hear me? Get up, get up.
Come on, mate, get up.
Suddenly I could hear an English voice.
You have to keep going, all right?
But it was Michael Dillon begging me to come down.
Lincoln, listen
To me. Come on, Lincoln.
Lincoln, you have to help the Sherpas.
To help you. Get up, mate. Come on, get up.
And that managed to get through to me, and suddenly
We're coming down.
I was back.
He's getting up now. He's getting up.
But now Lincoln must rappel down the treacherous second step. And this time, he's on his own.
And I needed to descend that using a rope, and there was a ladder. I started going down the rope.
Lincoln!
I managed to get halfway down. And then I started hearing voices. And suddenly, I became incredibly frightened. I just panicked. was just incredibly scared. My immediate thought was that I'm going to die.
Lincoln loses consciousness again, suspended at 28,000 feet.
And then
Lincoln, listen to me. Lincoln, listen to me. Your mind is not
Hey Dylan, happy birthday, mate.
I was hallucinating.
Change your way, change your way.
We knew that they'd run out of oxygen by now. We knew that meant all the effort of trying to get Lincoln to come down was exhausting everyone. It was probably the key factor that was going to kill Lincoln.
As the Sherpas desperately try to push Lincoln on, disaster strikes again.
I collapsed in exhaustion. I just had no energy. And I was able to move no further. I was actually felt quite pleased to lie there.
Lincoln, keep breathing. Breathe. Lincoln. Lincoln.
The Sherpas put their finger into Lincoln's eye and he didn't respond at all, so he was in a comatose state. We knew that Lincoln wouldn't live because if you've got cerebral edema, you've been without oxygen and you're that high on Everest, no one has survived.
The Sherpas say a prayer and collect Lincoln's belongings to return to his family. Lincoln Hall is left for dead. Three hours after being left to die, Lincoln emerges from his comatose state.
I felt completely disoriented. I was exhausted, dehydrated. I'd been left for dead, and I was still there. I was still alive. I very carefully looked for my pack, which had some really useful things like a warm thermos and a headlamp and some extra clothing.
But the pack has gone. Lincoln's guides have taken all of his gear to return to his loved ones.
My immediate thought was that I'm going to die. Having been left for dead with no shelter and no oxygen, how could I possibly survive up here?
As the night wears on, the temperature plummets to minus 25 degrees.
It was so cold. There was a wind swirling around like a hurricane.
Exposed near the summit, Lincoln is now at serious risk of hypothermia. If he falls asleep, he will drift back into a coma and quickly freeze to death.
Staying alive meant staying awake. I kept telling myself,
Just stay awake. Just stay awake.
my mind was ready just to drift off into nothingness, into the warmth of imminent hypothermia. But I just couldn't let that happen. So I rocked my body in a sort of circular motion.
As the hours go by and the temperature drops further, Lincoln doubts he'll make it through the night.
My family's back home, and there's this aura of death. I had an hallucination where I was wearing a really warm and comforting cloak. But that cloak was the warmth and the welcoming of my imminent death. And I thought, well, this is when I'm actually going to die. And then I had horrible, horrible recognition of the fact that I would not ever see my family again. I could not accept that. Because if I died, my family would be destroyed.
I love you, Barbara.
Love was the overriding emotion.
You're having a great birthday, mate.
I couldn't wear the cloak of death. I had to find a way out. I had to come back to my family.
Incredibly, he's still alive. But alone, near the summit of Mount Everest, he's barely clinging on to life.
The earth was beneath my feet, and I thought, that can't be right. That can't possibly be right. This huge mountain can't be moving. Therefore, I must be on a boat. I was so contained in that bizarre world of hallucinations and loneliness and cold and death. I didn't know where I was. I knew someone was there. It was all very confusing because I'd been living in a very intense world of being alone and coping with that, and suddenly there were other people who'd come from somewhere.
Leading one of the very last climbing parties of the season, Everest guide Dan Mazur has found Lincoln by chance.
That was actually the last day that there was anyone else on the mountain. Those four final climbers would have been expecting to step over my dead body.
And as another night falls, Lincoln's progress is painfully slow. The Sherpas know that their lives are now on the line.
I was saying we have to go more slowly.
Move! Go!
And they were saying, no, you have to go fast.
They push Lincoln hard.
Keep going!
They were prepared to do anything to get me off the mountain.
I said go!
I could tell from the tone of their voices that they were tired and exhausted and they didn't want to be there.
Move!
only thing I could do was just to hold on to my commitment to find a way through this. I just had to be able to keep walking to stay alive. But I was going to do it. I was going to get back so I could get home.
We're close, Lincoln. We're close.
I came around a slight crest in the slope. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to survive. It was just a flood of relief. But I didn't have any energy left for jubilation.
Hello? Lincoln?
Lincoln's voice was so hoarse, I couldn't believe it was him.
It's okay.
She knew it was me. And that was just the most wonderful moment.
It's okay, baby. I'm okay, I'm fine. I love you too.
I came so close to destroying the family that I loved so much that I vowed that I would never let anything like this ever happen again.
At great personal risk, the Sherpas saved Lincoln's life.
I really wanted them to know that they'd saved my life and that I would be forever grateful.
Lincoln recovered, but lost the tips of his fingers and a toe to frostbite. He still rock climbs, but has no plans to attempt any more major peaks. Doctors have yet to understand how he survived so long, with so little oxygen and without shelter, in Everest's death zone. Flushed with success, Matt feels he deserves a treat and decides to head for a hunter's cabin nearly 4 kilometers away in the valley below. These simple huts are scattered across the wilderness, available for anyone to use.
I'm thinking, yeah, it'd be quite nice to have a night in a hut rather than another night under canvas. I was looking down at the valley floor and really, yeah, not thinking too hard about where I was going.
But these mountains don't forgive the careless.
Found myself sliding down the hillside on my back, tried to dig my feet in, tried to dig my arms in, and think, yeah, we'll stop soon. Realisation dawns that I'm not slowing down, but I'm actually picking up speed. And then I realised that there's a cliff coming up. I'm not going to stop before I go over that.
With nothing to grab onto and no one to help him, Matt's momentum is about to plunge him into the void.
I did not expect to be alive when I hit the bottom.
As Matt plummets through the air, he's certain his life is over.
It felt like a very long time in the air between the top of that cliff and the bottom. In that time, an amazing amount of thoughts go through your head. It felt like an eternity. I don't remember the sensation of the impact. What I do remember most clearly is the thought, I'm still alive. It really was absolute surprise. Nothing felt too bad.
Matt experiences a wave of relief. It seems he's had a miraculous escape. But his adrenaline-soaked body is deceiving him. His wrist is smashed.
Where there used to be a straight wrist, there's now an inch dog's leg, and it doesn't look good at all.
And Matt's moment of horror doesn't end there. His ankle joint is pulverized. His tibia appears to be disconnected from his foot.
You can see the main bone from my leg trying to come out through the skin on the side of my ankle. It is pretty excruciating pain, the sort that gets into your gut and you actually feel physically sick.
But Matt's broken bones are suddenly the least of his worries. He realizes that he's lying in a fast-growing pool of blood.
There was obviously another serious injury somewhere, and I'm losing a lot of blood. I might not have very long left here.
Matt needs to find out where all the blood is coming from before he loses consciousness.
I start looking around. I find a gash across the back of my thigh. My finger's going up to the knuckle. It's that deep. It's gone straight through the muscle, and it looks like a piece of butchered meat.
Matt has no medical kit capable of sealing a massive wound like this, and has to improvise using a thermal t-shirt.
Grabbed a thermal and jammed it into this hole I'd found in the back of my leg. Took about 10 minutes to stop the bleeding, and it was a terrifying 10 minutes.
Matt has just averted almost certain death, but he has a smashed wrist and ankle, and is in excruciating pain. He knows he needs medical help, and fast. Then he suddenly remembers. He has a distress beacon. When activated, it uses satellites to alert rescue services and pinpoint his location.
I'm thinking, well, all I've got to do here is get that beacon activated, and there'll be people here within a couple of hours. The weather's clear, the choppers can fly, so I'm going to get out of here.
But Matt's search through his rucksack yields nothing. And he can't see the beacon anywhere around him.
And it slowly begins to dawn on me that this locator beacon isn't here. I haven't got it with me. I'm in big trouble.
He's left it on a shelf back at the shop. Matt's usually meticulous preparation has deserted him in his hour of need. Any hope of raising the alarm is now gone. And then an even more terrible thought hits him. No one back at his shop is due to raise the alarm for another week. He and little dog are on their own.
It's not going to be a case of an hour and a half. I'm actually going to have to keep myself alive for well over a week up on this exposed mountainside.
Matt's mountain experience tells him he has no chance without water and shelter. And he has neither.
I've got to get myself some shelter where I can get at water, where I can keep myself warm, where I can keep myself dry. We could have snow, we could have any sort of weather. I've got to start looking after myself.
But there's nothing in sight that could give him protection. His only option is to head downhill until he finds anywhere he can pitch his tent. As each tiny movement triggers daggers of pain, Matt faces up to the prospect of what lies ahead of him.
It's not a case of gritting your teeth and overcoming it. You know it's going to hurt, and you know it's going to be hard.
As Matt begins to drag his open wound and smashed limbs across rock and dirt, he knows he's beginning a journey through hell. But even the slightest contact with his broken bones is agonizing.
It'd be nice to scramble on my hands and knees, but I can't even use my hands because my wrist is broken. If I kept the weight off the broken bits, I was fine, but as soon as I tried to put the weight on my wrist or on my ankle, I get a wave of pain going up through my whole body.
Nightfall is just hours away, and temperatures are already falling. Matt knows he must find shelter for him and little dog, but when he tries to press on, the pain overwhelms him.
Every time I try and put any weight on my left leg, I can see my calf bone trying to exit through the skin on the side of my ankle.
Matt's tibia is no longer supported by his ankle, so there's nothing to stop it pushing directly through his skin and out of his leg. Finally, after an agonizing crawl over razor-sharp rocks, Matt's shocked body has had enough. He knows he must try and pitch a tent as soon as he can, or risk freezing to death. He has no idea whether he can manage it. He just knows he has to try.
And just the basics like getting tent pegs in, or even getting the tent flattened out onto the ground into the right shape, I've just rendered 10, 20-fold more difficult when you've only got one hand to work with. I think the adrenaline does the hard work for you. It keeps you going, it doesn't let you stop.
Matt knows if he doesn't build a tent, there's no way he'll cope with the night's freezing temperatures.
Generally holding tent pegs with that broken right hand and then bashing them in with whatever rocks I could find using my left hand. I almost want to vomit from the force of that pain.
Matt's desperate and gritty determination finally results in a shelter. But the 20-meter crawl, followed by the tortuous struggle to pitch his tent, have taken their toll.
I'm asleep almost instantly. I'm exhausted, absolutely exhausted.
But Matt's exhausted sleep is suddenly disturbed. Despite a night of freezing temperatures, somehow Matt and little dog make it to the morning. But his relief is temporary. He quickly realizes that although he's got enough food for just over a week, it's mostly dried. And Matt has no water left to boil it in.
One of the things I'd actually lost in the fall was my water bottle, so all I had to keep water in was my billy, my cooking pot.
Matt's managed to pitch his tent close to water. Simple for little dog to get to, but for him, it will mean enduring unspeakable pain.
It took a long time of lying there thinking about it to get myself up and to go and actually do it. No, yeah, we need water. Let's go and do it. Come on.
But it's not just water for cooking and drinking that Matt needs. Unless he cleans his deep leg wound, he risks serious infection.
It was harder going down, a lot harder, just because it's very hard to slow yourself down and to control your descent with all the broken bones.
Matt's entire concentration is focused on avoiding pain and not losing his cooking pot.
I can't just throw it down to the bottom and then go and find it, because what if it rolls away? What if it gets washed away in the river? I cannot afford to lose this pan.
Matt's had nothing to drink for 24 hours and is seriously dehydrated. His leg dressing has prevented further blood loss, but the wound is now full of cotton fibre and grit from the fall. He must clean it out or risk infection.
It was a very real risk if I didn't do everything I could to avoid it.
Matt doesn't have any antiseptic available to clean his wound. But he has got table salt, which he knows has antibacterial properties. It'll be excruciating, but he has no choice. With a broken wrist and ankle, plus a real risk of gangrene, Matt must somehow endure 6 more days before rescue is likely, or risk dying alone on this mountain. With his wounds treated as best he can, Matt spends an agonizing hour inching back to camp, trying not to spill the water he's just collected.
I had to keep my broken ankle and broken wrist up in the air, because if they hit the ground, then there was agony as a result.
The trip down to the creek is such an ordeal. Matt decides to ration water so that he can avoid the whole agonizing process as much as possible.
I generally got about 2/3 of the pan full. I decided at that stage that no, I was going to try and make water last for 2 days, so I didn't have to go down to this river every day and put myself through that, because all this movement is exacerbating all the injuries.
By eking out his rations of dried food and gritting his teeth through gut-wrenching pain, astonishingly, Matt makes it through the week. And miraculously, the deadline when Matt expects the alarm to be raised has finally arrived.
Cheers, LD. Cheers. We made it.
The note he's left back at work will trigger an emergency response, and the rescue helicopter should arrive within hours. For the first time in a week, Matt's spirits soar.
Absolute elation to be there. You know, I've done it. That's the hardest bit over. I really, really believed I'd done it.
Matt keeps a weather eye out for choppers. He reckons they'll be in the area any time now. But as the hours pass, Matt's elation begins to dampen. After a week of good weather, conditions and visibility start to worsen.
By about 9 o'clock, I was just in solid cloud.
Little dog, come on. It's...
Probably by 10 o'clock, it was absolutely thundering down on the tent.
Matt knows that rescue helicopters will not fly in a storm. He will have to wait. But the longer he waits, the worse the storm gets. Matt's thoughts of rescue are fast giving way to a new and chilling fear.
The creeks on the west coast of New Zealand can rise very, very quickly with that sort of amount of water falling out of the sky.
Within the hour, Matt's worst fears are realised. His tent is pitched just feet from a growing torrent.
The creek next to me had gone from a chuckle, a gurgle, to an absolute roar. The river was rising so fast, it had already come up probably 2 or 3 metres in the previous hour. If it got to where I would have been in trouble.
The swollen creek is now threatening to engulf his tent.
If the force of that water started hitting the tent, I was going to have to get out of there.
And when a deadly rumble pierces the storm, Matt's life is in real danger.
You could hear rocks being washed down this creek. The sound and feeling of the shocks as those boulders hit each other was a terrifying experience.
Gotta get out of here, Alfie.
Matt is desperate to get to higher ground. But he knows that if he crawls outside, his crippled body won't make it.
There was no way I could keep my footing with one good leg in there. It was just no way. I'd have been swept away.
He's trapped, and the stream that was his lifeline could now be his executioner.
Knowing there was nowhere I could go was frightening.
All Matt and Little Dog can do is hold on and pray.
The sun came out, and the river started to drop.
Matt is certain that rescue is now only hours away.
I spent the evening just lying there at the door of my tent, ready to jump out and start waving things if anything started flying up the valley.
But back at his shop, Matt's note to raise the alarm has not been read by anyone.
And it was beginning to dawn on me that something's gone wrong here. They should have been out here by now, and they haven't come.
By 6 p.m., the growing horror of his situation becomes clearer. With his provisions running low, and only a question of time before infection sets in somewhere, he knows he must move, or face almost certain death.
If I waited any longer and made that decision later, the whole thing was going to be very, very difficult to do. Whereas if I did it now, I could do it. I believed I could do it.
Matt calculates that his only chance is to try and reach a hunter's hut he spotted before his accident. It might have fuel, food, medical supplies, and maybe even people. But it's nearly 1,000 meters below him in the valley. For a man who can barely move, Matt faces the biggest decision of his life.
I'm going to have to do this the hard way.
Reaching the hunter's hut in the valley below is Matt's only chance of rescue. But to get there, he knows he cannot crawl. He must try and walk. But with a smashed wrist, deeply cut leg, and worst of all, a fractured tibia, just standing up will push him to the limits of his endurance.
It was just a continuous process of forcing your way, almost swimming over the top of this vegetation. I was just getting tighter and tighter and tighter.
After 3 tortuous hours of struggle, Matt's dreadful injuries are taking their toll, and he's made hardly any progress.
Come on, you mad bum.
Seeing Little Dog negotiate the thick scrub so easily gives Matt an idea.
It got to the stage where there was no way of crawling over the top anymore. I was forced to squirm my way underneath.
After hours of gruesome effort and delirious with pain, Matt's made it through the worst of the brutal scrub.
And that was such a relief just to get out of that stuff and into this good going. I mean, I could stand up again and actually walk.
The hut can't be too far ahead now. But to reach it, Matt will have to force his broken limbs down a near vertical slope.
I was determined to reach the bottom of this slope.
Matt knows he's not going to be able to control his descent. Worse, the rocks and branches are going to punch and gouge his terrible wounds. It's a bloody gamble that could cripple him or kill him.
It was getting steeper, and so I was using whatever means I could.
Pushing his body to the extreme has paid off. Matt is now less than 2 kilometers from the hut. But getting to the valley floor has not come without tremendous cost.
I've done myself a lot of damage coming down this hill. My limbs are useless.
Matt can only hope the worst is behind him. The hut, and possible salvation, is tantalizingly close. But just as Matt finally allows himself to believe that he's made it, his dreams are brutally shattered. A fast, freezing river stands between him and the end of a nightmare.
That was so disheartening. It was so close, but unreachable, just out of reach.
Matt's body has already had to endure more than it can stand. And now, if he wants to live, he'll have to take his shattered bones and horrific wounds into the icy water.
Whether I could swim, whether I could propel myself was my real fear.
Matt makes his decision. He either dies on this bank or gambles his life in one last shot at surviving.
The water was absolutely freezing. All my muscles started to seize up.
Matt is quickly struggling. His weak, damaged body is no match for the fierce, freezing current. He has to fight the current or drown.
It wasn't what I needed. I was trying to swim a river with broken bones.
Matt knows that whether he lives or dies now depends entirely on the river, not on anything he can do.
I felt the main current begin to pull me, and it was dragging me over towards the far bank of the river.
Frozen and horribly maimed, Matt's washed up on shore barely alive. He's had a miraculous escape.
Every muscle in my body had seized. Everything had just stopped working. Very, very, very hard going, just even to move up the riverbank and away from the river. Very hard.
9 days after he was injured, Matt can see the hut. But he finally has to accept that he's probably going to die before he reaches it.
Cheers, LD.
I remember just thinking I might not have very long left here.
It's you and me, boy.
I couldn't have seen a more beautiful sight than that hunter walking out of that hut.
I got you, mate. I got you. Oh, lie down, eh?
And that's the moment I know I'm getting out of here. And I can't describe as good a moment as that. I was safe. It was relief. It was joy.
After patching him up as best they can, Matt's rescuers head off on a 13-hour trek to raise the alarm. 12 days after he started his journey, Matt is airlifted to the hospital, where doctors save his leg and rebuild his shattered ankle and wrist with metal pins. 6 months after his horrific experience, Matt is back in the mountains with little dog.
The experience has made me realise what I value in life and what I don't. Having got out, you appreciate those companions that you had through life so much more.